listener production.
Hey, Bension Siebert here with you for the briefing. This week, pro-Palestine protesters sprayed the words "Zionism is fascism" in red paint on an electorate office window of Jewish Federal Labor MP Josh Burns. Police say at least 5 people were involved in the attack, also smashing another window and lighting fires just outside the office in the early hours of Wednesday morning. It's the latest in a string of vandalism attacks on the offices of Australian MPs, targeted for their stance on the war in Gaza. Overseas, just in the past 24 hours, activists sprayed orange paint on Stonehenge to protest the continuing use of fossil fuels. All this raises a question. What kind of protest is acceptable? What crosses the line? And does the killing of tens of thousands of people or the climate crisis ever justify crossing it? There is arguably no one in Australia better equipped to help us understand this question than Bob Brown. He's spent a lifetime protesting in one form or another, from saving the Franklin River in Tasmania in the 1970s, all the way through to earlier this year when the 79-year-old was arrested during an anti-logging protest in Tasmania's Styx Valley. He's pleaded not guilty to a charge of trespass and will face court next month. Protesters have also targeted him over his decades as a politician, including as longtime leader of the Australian Greens and as a Tasmanian senator. So, what does this veteran of Australian activism and politics think of the way that protest is happening right now in this country? Bob Brown, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing. Speaking as someone who's spent decades protesting, what for you is the point of a protest? What is it meant to achieve?
Well, it's meant to achieve recognition in the public arena that something being carried out by government or by private enterprise is wrong. And it's a time-honoured part of representative democracies. The High Court of Australia has ruled such under our Constitution. And of course, we can see examples of it going right back thousands of years in history. But notably, I think the suffragettes who protested and brought to attention the need for women to have the vote, and because they prevailed, but it took many decades.
Is protesting worth doing even if it has no discernible impact on what you're trying to stop or what you're trying to change? It must be disheartening if you can protest for a really long time and basically nothing happens.
Well, there's a case in point with the protesters who, as I talk to you, have been in the Takina rainforest in northwest Tasmania over the last 5 weeks, and more than a dozen have been arrested. But there's been no coverage, for example, on the ABC, and there's been no coverage, as far as I know, of that protest on the mainland. You might think, well, all they're doing is putting themselves in the position of going to jail. But who could say that it's a waste of time, or that they shouldn't be doing it, or they should just... my dad was a policeman, and it's the old dictum he put into me very early. When you see something is wrong, a crime is being committed, and you do nothing, you become part of the problem.
So in your view, it's worth it, even if, for example, the media ignores it?
Exactly. If it's the right thing to do, it's certainly worth it. And there's many episodes in history which the media hasn't known about that have taken place, and we've got to know about them later. I mean, protesting in the environment goes back 400 years ago to women hugging trees in India when the Maharaja wanted to smash down the forest to build a new palace, and they were beheaded. But we all take, those of us who are in the global environment movement, in an age of enormous global peril, take heart from the fact that they made that stand. They were ignored at the time. Officialdom smashed them. But the forest was eventually saved, not until after 200 people had died. But that's right back then. And we're now in a democracy, and people who are taking similar defence on forests, even if they are being ignored, are doing the right thing and will encourage others down the future by their example.
As you know, people have been protesting the war in Gaza for months and months in Australia. Recently, we saw a whole bunch of MPs' offices vandalised. People also sprayed red paint on the offices of the ABC and elsewhere. What's your reaction to seeing those images?
Well, it's interesting bringing that up, Bension, because I understand from news reports that 5 people were involved in that. But tens of thousands of people have been protesting in Australia and millions around the world. It's the 5 who get the attention, and it's it's counterproductive. I have all my life maintained that protests should be peaceful. And I note that more prominent figures in Australia are saying exactly that. Well, Adam Bandt, the leader of the Greens, for example, saying that those protests are wrong. They're counterproductive, but they're inherently violent. We are seeking peace, not least against the extraordinary spectacle of following the violent October the 7th massacre in Israel, which was roundly condemned by the world. The ongoing massacre of now heading towards 40,000 people, including 15,000 children in Gaza. And, the vast majority of people who are protesting about that in Australia are wanting peace, who are wanting justice. And as far as I'm concerned, of course, how would this country be if it was entirely silent about both that injustice that's occurring and, as many are saying, the failure of the Labor government to take greater action to end this violence that's now being pursued by Netanyahu in Gaza and the West Bank.
So is targeting MPs' offices going too far? One of the arguments we see, certainly on social media, is tens of thousands of Palestinians have been murdered and, oh, you're traumatised by some paint on a window, world's smallest violin. Like, does the killing of thousands of people justify vandalising MPs' offices in Australia?
Not in my books, because the smashing of windows is counterproductive. And what's in the working democracy, I think the majority of Australians are appalled by what Netanyahu and the Israeli government is doing. It's mass murder. But the people who are appalled by that will in the main also be appalled by smashing of windows and daubing of paint on people who are elected to represent us in the National Parliament. And I think it is legitimate to hold peaceful protests at MPs' offices, but not violent protests, and that's crossed the line.
You were a politician for many years. Did you ever find yourself feeling unsafe because of any kind of protest that was directed at you?
Yes, I had police escort in the days of the Labor Green Accord in Tasmania, where we were putting a limit on logging, and that involved death threats. And earlier back in the Franklin campaign, of course, and was beaten up. And after that, in the 80s, in forest campaigning, had shots fired in my direction. And in the end, although I was a member of Parliament, the court in Tasmania fined the people responsible for shooting on a Sunday. And the job comes with risks, but the job of the police and the authorities is to ignore the politics of it and to stop that violence and that threat occurring. And so I relate very strongly to people who are having the offices smashed and the threats and the nastiness which comes with that. We have got to have more civilisation, not less of it. And in a peace-loving democracy, that means being able to protest peacefully but it doesn't mean being able to inherently threaten people's lives and limbs.
One of the arguments that's made against the protests in the native forests in Tasmania is that it in some way threatens the safety of the people who work to log those forests. Do you think you've ever made anyone feel unsafe during your own time protesting?
There's never been anybody hurt in a protest that we've been involved with in the Tasmanian forest over many, many years. But logging a forest is inherently itself violent, and it's one of the most dangerous jobs in anywhere in Australia or in the world, and has a very large death and injury toll compared to the very small number of workers are there. It's an entirely unnecessary industry and putting people at risk by corporations who are making money out of it, and taxpayers are funding logging is the real problem there. It's not the peaceful protesters. And, maybe that's why in large measure the media is ignoring the widespread protests against logging which are occurring around the country. And the extraordinary thing is that where you get acts of violence occurring, then suddenly it becomes foremost in the headlines. But that's the way our society works.
Some of the environmental protests that we've seen in Australia, they're sort of directly aimed at inconveniencing the general public, which I think makes a lot of everyday Australians go, what are you doing this for? Why are you sort of trying to piss us off, if anything? If it just pisses people off, is that worth doing anyway? And what's fundamentally the aim of that kind of protest?
Well, I think you're now talking largely about climate change protests, and that's a case where coming down the line, according to the scientific evidence, this 2.5 degrees warming this century, massive death toll. There's already hundreds of thousands of people dying because of climate change, and we just saw 500 people die at the Hajj in Saudi Arabia in a heat wave. This is in the last few days. Very little coverage of that, but we are looking at an enormous health toll, death toll, and trillions of dollars of economic damage and loss of jobs due to climate change. Inconvenience to public is an easy one for big business and feckless politicians to point to. Let's go back to logging. 70% of Australians want logging stopped. And so it should be, because we've got enough plantations to meet all our wood needs. But we've got politicians under the impress of massively powerful corporate and moneyed interests, so that 70% of them want more logging. And the counterbalance coming from public protest to that enormous lobbying going on behind closed doors is very, very legitimate. I think if we got rid of the lobbying system and the corruption of it on the body, the corrupting influence of it on the body politic, we'd have far fewer failure.
Activism of all kinds is often criticised sort of from every angle. So there's social media, that's slacktivism. If we look at the university encampments, people sort of consider those students entitled rich kids, and stopping morning traffic is annoying and doesn't convince anyone. Those are the arguments, at least. What's your advice to young activists trying to figure out what to do that's actually effective if they want change?
Well, I think you've really pointed to it. It is keep the public on side. You can listen to the vested interests, the logging corporations or the mining corporations or whoever, the coal miners and gas frackers and international brigands who are causing such destruction around the planet. But put that aside. It's what the public thinks in a democracy, and keep the public on side. And I, for example, have, since I left the body politic, the Senate, established the Bob Brown Foundation as an activist organisation, as a forest defending organisation. And our motto is, don't get depressed, get active. And the result of that is enormous public support. We're growing in leaps and bounds. The public likes it. They want it. The idea coming from big business that activism is a blight on society is absolutely shown to be a fraud by the fact that people are so supportive of good public protest.
Well, Bob Brown, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Bension.
Bob Brown there. That's it for this episode of The Briefing. We'll be back in your feed tomorrow at 6 a.m. If this episode made you think, please share it with a friend. We love it when you do. You can also follow us on our Instagram page. Search The Briefing Podcast. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you soon.